Hey, we are going to do communion today at the end, just in case you're wondering what these are about. That's what that's about. But hang on to those for now. Don't do anything with them yet. It's not time. So we're going to deal with emotions for several weeks. Isn't that fun? And yeah, we had a good time last week. It'll get better and better. One of the things that I said last week was that emotions, they really need to be paid attention to. And the reason is that when they pop up, they're actually a window into our soul that's only open when those emotions surface. Otherwise, we're just kind of going through life kind of assuming, well, everything's fine in there. You know, I do good things. I'm committed to my local church, or I volunteer in this. I do these things. I pay my taxes, yada, yada. You know, everything's fine. But then, now and again, an emotion pops up. Something triggers it, and you see a part of yourself that maybe you weren't so sure was in there. And you're kind of like, whoa. You know, it's a where'd that come from moment. I don't know if you've ever had a where'd that come from moment. I have had several. One of the ones I was remembering as I was putting this together, we're talking about anger today, by the way. Woohoo! I should see more positivity coming off the seats this morning, right? We're going to talk about anger, and I had a moment. I was about 18, and if you're ever sick of hearing about the time in my life when I was sick, I'm so sorry, but I'm not. You know, it was a lot of things happened right around there. I was turning 18 and the adult thing, and I got horrendously ill, and so I went away and I had a series of surgeries, big ones, cool ones, and I hadn't been able to eat food in like 2 months, like real food. And I hadn't been able to actually even be home for like 2 months. I was in a hospital. And so I finally was able to come home after this big ordeal. And I remember I was so hungry, and it didn't matter what I found in the fridge. I was going to find something. So I don't know what it was. It was yogurt or ice cream or something, you know, something I couldn't have. And I'm like, I'm going to have it. And there was this low-slung chair kind of off to the side of the kitchen. And when I came home, I was like, I'm so hungry, but I'm also so tired because I couldn't. Oh, I'm telling you, all your muscles like shrivel up to nothing after being bedridden for that long. And I had a cane. Like I was all like, I was winded walking from the car into the house, you know. So I get in there and I'm like, I'm going to sit in that chair. But the problem was it was so low. I'm trying to like figure out how am I going to like get down into that chair, you know. Like I had like 40 plus of these beautiful shiny stainless staples holding me together still, and I was like, how am I gonna, you know, the pregnancy shuffle thing, you know, like sometimes you see, like, how am I gonna, I don't know how I did it, but got down in there, and then it occurred to me in that moment, I didn't have a spoon. I did not have a spoon. I did not pick up my excitement. So I'm down in this chair, which I may never get back up from again, right? And I'm like, but fortunately, a couple family members happened to breeze into the kitchen just that moment and pass through, and first one, and then I was just like, oh, wait. Hey, can you get me a spoon? And they walked on by like I didn't say a thing. Whew. I was like, well, maybe they just didn't hear me. So I got a little louder. It was hard, too. I'm like, hey, you know, because I can't hardly breathe, right? And I'm like, hey, you know, I need a spoon. And one of them walked back in. They looked at me blankly. They grabbed a spoon out of the drawer and they said, next time, get it yourself. And they threw it at me, and it was like, clink, like it hit the right, you know what I'm saying? Like how they got that spoon to hit the line just right, to like hit them all at once and go clink. I don't know if you've ever watched like a Clash of the Titans kind of a movie. You know, in Greek mythology, I guess, there's the Kraken. Right? The Kraken is this mythical creature that is only to be unleashed when it's time to destroy the world. And I'm telling you what, at 18, I was just kind of coming around back to faith a little bit and trying to get myself under control. And I had only ever seen anger done badly. And if you've ever, been in that position before, if that's kind of what you grew up with, you're not real comfortable just letting everybody have it. Once you become a believer, you're like, I better tone that back a little bit. I better, I've only ever seen it used as like an atomic weapon for destruction, so I guess I'd better learn to just cap that. And I had been capping it for a long time up to that point, but something about that moment just released the Kraken. And I just let go in this tirade of months of frustration and expletives and telling them just exactly what I thought. And here's the problem. It was so bad, I can't even really remember what I said. I've had very few moments in my life where I couldn't remember what I actually said. That's one of them. I just know it was awful. And afterwards, I had this terrible moment where I'm like, am I just full of poison? Is that just what am I just unsalvageable? I worked so hard not to be that. And yet here was a whole bunch of that, and it was just boom, it fire hosed out in that moment. And I was so confused too, because it's actually that was really bad. That was really bad, and that's not right. And at the same time, I'm proportionately, I know it didn't really that was kind of the dynamic we already had. So, it wasn't this intentional thing meant to make me explode either. Some of you are like, oh, maybe it was. Well, maybe it was. But, proportionate, no. It came out as just nasty, mean, terrible stuff. And I was like, oh. And sometimes, if you're a believer, things happen in your life that trigger stuff. It comes out of you, and if it's anger, you're left to question, well, am I just awful, or is some of that called for? Because we don't do a great job teaching Christians how to do anger well. We don't. And like I said before, most of the time, we learn to handle anger as a result of the way that people have trained us to use it over time. Not really like God's version, but just however it was that we had to learn to cope or survive or whatever. If you've been surrounded by super, super angry, destructive people, a lot of people kind of flip-flop to the other side when they get older, and they're like, I don't want anything to do with that. They learn to just not have it. If they feel angry, no, I'm not. No, I'm not. No, I'm not. I'm not frustrated. I'm fine. Everything's fine. I'm not going to go atomic. Some people just never learn anger management because they've never even seen people that were key in their lives really get angry. And they just thought, well, they're just not angry. They never get angry. They never get frustrated. And then stuff happens to them later in their life, and they have no idea what to do with it. It must be malfunctioning. Because mom and dad never were angry. And truth be told, they certainly were. They just had some other version of dealing with it that you never ever got to see. Some people came from places or have been trained by important relationships to just kind of go with whatever comes out. We're just talking, and other people looking from the outside in, looking at guys, you are really angry all the time. Why are you all so angry? Oh, this is just how we are. We insult each other all the time. It's just what we do, A lot of the time, it's more about what we've been trained to do by key relationships in our life than by anything that's actually the healthy or right way. But there actually is, believe it or not, no matter what you think, no matter what you've experienced, there's a purpose for anger. You're like, no way. Yeah, it actually has a purpose. And what we're going to do is just dig a little bit in a couple of spots in the New Testament, just pick away at that purpose. Because if you're frustrated or you're angry or whatever it is, here's the truth. You actually need to dig to find out why, if you're going to understand what's going on in yourself at all. It's not enough to just assume, well, angry equals evil, or, angry, I just shouldn't be angry. There's nothing, or just let it all loose. It's not safe to assume either or. We actually have a responsibility to dig and look and see what is going on. So we're looking first at one version of anger, one motivation for anger. And motivation matters, by the way. We're looking at John 2. This is the famous story of Jesus being angry. This is the one that preachers call on sometimes. You look, see, even Jesus got angry. We're not always told what we should do about it. I might get the impression I'm supposed to put together a whip of cords and go and take care of some people, right? Like, what are we supposed to get out of this? So just bear with for a second and look at this story, and we'll see what's behind it. So John wrote that when it was almost time for the Jewish Passover, Jesus went up to Jerusalem. In the temple courts, he found men selling cattle, sheep, and doves, and others sitting at tables exchanging money. So he made a whip out of cords and drove off from the temple area both sheep and cattle. He scattered the coins of the money changers and overturned their tables. To those who sold doves, he said, "Get these out of here. How dare you turn my Father's house into a market?" And when he was done doing those things, it's written that his disciples remembered that it's written, "Zeal for your house will consume me." What in the world was that about? Well, so just quick background. The temple system, okay, the religious system that was given to the Jews by God was a system that had animal sacrifice built into it. A lot of people know that. To most of us today, that seems kind of like weird and crude. Like, what? Animals are going to die? Like, that just seems like, why? What's the point of that? And that's odd to us. But the truth is, it was meant for them and their time to teach them to associate a couple of things. And really the big idea was that sin has a result. And when sin occurs, there's the beginning of the death of something beautiful that God had made for a purpose. And that has to be accounted for. There's no escaping that truth, that sin is the beginning of death. And it was a voluntary system, believe it or not. People, didn't get policed. People weren't like running around checking on people's sin and making sure, hey, I saw you do that last week. You better get down to the temple and, sacrifice a dove. Like, it wasn't like that. It was voluntary. You were to understand that as part of your relationship with God, you had to constantly take stock of what you have been and how you've been and where you've been and realize that there are times if you've mistakenly sinned or purposefully sinned, you would actually, there's a prescription for that. You're supposed to go down to the temple. You're supposed to sacrifice a certain type, a certain way. And by the way, most of the time they actually like cooked the animal and ate it. It wasn't just like this, burn it up in the air kind of a thing. Sometimes there were pieces that were like that, but a lot of the time it was, we're actually going to eat this, and the priest get half, and your family gets half. It wasn't quite as weird as you think. But that's kind of the deal. It was meant to associate sin with punishment that's irreversible, and the whole thing was meant to remind you that God's actually very gracious, because we're reminding you of this so that you take your relationship with God yet more seriously. He doesn't want to just wipe you off the face of the earth. He's not just like this smiter of smiters who just, you made a mistake, you're gone. He values you. He wants you. He wants to work on this with you. He wants to reinforce some things with you, like a parent. So Jesus walks in there, and you're supposed to take these, if you were going to make an animal sacrifice, you're supposed to find a blemish-free animal that was supposed to be, not the one that had the busted, gimpy leg, that couldn't do anything anymore anyway. It was meant to be a valuable animal. It was supposed to count. It was supposed to cost, feel like cost. And so what happens is a lot of times people would come into Jerusalem from all over the place, like just to come to Jerusalem to make a sacrifice there just one time, because it was their capital city. It was the beautiful temple, right? And so the priest's job was, before they made the sacrifice, accepted, they had to make sure that actually this is an acceptable animal. It's actually blemish-free. It's not just busted up. They might correct you and say, hey, come on, guys, really? Like, you're just like cheapskating this thing? Like, come on. And so, funny thing, people have a way of turning a good thing into an opportunity for themselves. And so there was kind of a racket. You'd get there from out of town, bring your sheep in from all the way out of town, or maybe buy one in the city someplace. You get there, and there might be a guy sitting out at the gates with a table going, here's the thing. I've been watching the sacrifices that get accepted and the ones that don't today. I'm telling you, that's probably not going to make it through. And I don't want to see us stand in line all day and waste all that time and then get sent back and you're going to have to stay another day. You don't want that. Come on. But here's the thing. We got all these animals right over here. They're ready to go. And we pre-screen them. And they're going to be more than what you expect to pay, but they're here. It's convenient. And you can trade that one in if you want. We'll give you a little something for it. So they might do that. And then, of course, the problem is you can't buy or sell anything in the temple. You can't give gifts. You can't give offerings unless it's in Jewish temple money. And people coming from all over the Roman Empire had what? Roman money. And so you had to change it before you could do anything. And it was fine if they accepted some little fee for the work of changing the money. But these guys got to be exorbitant. Wow, I really just got... They really pulled it over on me this time. I'm not going to make that mistake again. Jesus saw the bad taste that was left in people's mouths, people who actually wanted to go and do good and do right things for the right reasons, and these guys are just taking advantage of it and leaving this awful, like I just got taken at Disney World. Like what? He's furious. This is not what this was meant to be. That is a good anger. That's anger that is done well. I'm talking about an anger that suits its purpose. Anger has been made to do a job, and the job is to make you intolerant of evil for the sake of others. It's made to make you have an alarm go off and say, no, that's wrong, that's wrong, that's wrong. No, 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 no. That will not be happening today. No, no more. You will not do that to these people. You will not do that for them. You will not, you will not, you will not. Or at the least, I will not stand idly by while you do that. And in the end, it protects relationships. Believe it or not. Believe it or not. Stop, you're damaging a relationship. Stop, you're damaging our relationship. Stop, you're damaging your relationship with God. Stop, you're damaging someone else's relationship with God. Stop, you're damaging my relationship with God. But somehow or another, you're going to do some damage to what matters most. I'm telling you, you have to stop. One of the hardest things I've seen people do is try and sort out their anger when it's towards someone they're supposed to be really close with. And they're trying to sort out, well, am I just being selfish? Or, and the truth is, it's not wrong to get angry with somebody that you're supposed to be close with. And honestly, the purpose for the anger is just that you see, like, if they continue to act in this way toward you, it's going to prevent you from being close with that person the way that you're meant to be. And so you want that closeness, but they're acting in a way you're never going to have it. Maybe it even gets worse. And so you speak up and you say, you can't do that anymore. Stop. Quit. I'm serious. That's one of the most confusing types. One of the easiest, simplest, and most beautiful ways you'll see is when somebody stands up for the rights or the good of another person and just says, I'm going to shield you from whatever's coming. I'm not going to accept that they're just going to do that to you anymore. It's a beautiful thing when it's done well. It's a smoke alarm. It's meant to be loud. It's meant to go off sometimes. And the more wrong a thing is, the louder it should be. It shields the fragile. It can protect the future of a relationship. Good anger can preserve relationships, shield faith. And get this, it can even inspire the offender, the one who's doing the bad, to actually rethink themselves. It can. It can. There probably have been times in your life when somebody spoke up, said, that's wrong, you can't do that. And like part of you kind of said, oh yeah, like I'm offended by that. How dare you? But then as you backed away a little bit and you thought a little bit, or somebody else said something to you, you said, well, maybe. I wonder. Am I as right as I think that I am? How are they so steamed about that? I've never even cared about that before. I've never cared about a person like that before. Who cares about, how can that be wrong? Well, But you can't always assume that your anger is good either. See, anger can be motivated by all kinds of things. We can hijack the emotion of anger internally by just, kind of adjusting right and wrong a little bit. We can adjust who's most important, me or God. Maybe we're equal. We start to adjust some things, and pretty soon anger can do all kinds of things. It can be harnessed by other people to accomplish their will in place of God's. James, who was Jesus' brother, knew all about anger. Think about this. He was Jesus' brother. So, he'd seen Jesus be angry. He'd seen Jesus not be angry. He'd seen other people be angry. He'd seen them, how they connected and crossed paths, and he'd seen it all. And this is one of the things that James wrote about in regards to anger. It says to a young church, a young group of believers, he says, what causes fights and quarrels among you? Don't they come from your desires that battle within you? You want something, but don't get it. You kill and covet, but you cannot have what you want. You quarrel and fight. You do not have because you do not ask God. When you ask, you don't receive because you ask with wrong motives. See, this is the side of anger we're most familiar with because we see it unchecked. Right? May not recognize it when it's happening in us, but we certainly can tell when it's happening in other people, right? Certainly, right? We have specific things that we want for ourselves. Sometimes those are based on good things. A lot of the time, they're based on things that are just less than good. They might be neutral, or they might actually do us harm if we ever got them. And James is saying, look, the cause of your problems amongst each other in this specific time, in this place, is that you guys want things and you're not getting your way. And the truth is, you need to back up and look and say, you know what, ultimately, people or no people, the gatekeeper to my desires is God. And if I'm not getting something that I really want, I can slap people around and twist their arms and complain about them and write up a slip and do all those things. But the truth is, if I want a thing and I'm still not getting it, it's because God has not given it to me yet. And I need to ask Him. And James says, if there's something that you desire and you don't have it, either you haven't asked God yet, or you haven't been asking very much or very long, or you just want something that you really shouldn't want right now. So at the bottom of every anger episode that we have, it would be good to stop and just ask a couple of questions. Is what I want something that God really wants me to have? And two, have I really asked Him? Really? More than just I shot up a prayer when I thought of it that one time, and if He's going to do something, I'll put it in His hands, He'll do something with it. Otherwise, I'm just going to do my own thing. But have you really asked? Have you persevered? Have you come back to it? Do you keep coming back to it? Either way, if we're wrong on one of those points, we're going to get frustrated, and we try to get out of other people what God has not let us have yet. We beat them up. We punish them. You can't twist God's arm very much, right? You can't slap Him. It's really hard. You can't threaten Him very much. But people, boy, if people aren't giving you what you want, man, you can do a lot with them. And so James is just pointing out, guys, the troubles that you guys have been having lately are really not really not what you think they're about. They're really about you and what your desires. It's a you anger, right? It's an anger that's all about your desires. I'd call it a me anger. It's all about me. It's what about I want. Why don't I have what I want yet? You guys are slowing me down. Keeping me. One of the most important things that you can do is if you find yourself angry or confused about your anger or frustrated or confused about your frustratedness, you might say, well, I'm not really angry, I'm just frustrated. Like that's like a level down, right? I'm not angry, I'm frustrated. Isn't it kind of the same thing? Isn't it kind of the same thing? Like you're not seeing what you should see. You're not, isn't it just like 5 quick steps from frustrated to like, oh, the Kraken, right? It's the same kind of a thing, just a nicer label. It's time to pause and ask and say, is this the good kind or is this the me kind? Is this like God's good anger He's putting in me because there's something that just isn't right, something that just isn't good, and I know, and I'm supposed to, something's supposed to happen. That's what emotions do at their best. We don't pay attention to them. We end up not taking action when we should. Or we end up taking action that we shouldn't because we didn't do the homework and dig, right? We just went with it, whatever it felt like. But if you find yourself confused, it's time to pause and ask and say, is this the good kind or is this the me kind? I'll just point something out that you've probably already thought of. Sometimes it's kind of a mix, isn't it? Sometimes it's kind of like hard to pick it apart because it's like, well, some of that was called for. Like that was clearly unfair. That was clearly the wrong thing to say. They shouldn't have done that. But then all of this extra came out of me. And why was that? Why did I have to call attention to how dumb I think they are and get mean and like insult them? Like that, I don't think that was the good kind. Chances are good most of your anger situations that pop up in life are going to have kind of like a mixture of things going on. Because why? Because you are a mixture of things going on. Aren't you? All right. Raise your hand if you believe that you are 100% selfish free. I'll wait. Well, there's a better church down the street that has all those people in because they do such a good job. But you guys are stuck with me, and you guys still have some issues, right? No, there's nobody like that. There's nobody that has completely arrived at this place where they only show anger when it's completely called for, and they only do it in the right way. And there's come on, get real. You can't commit to perfection, but what you can commit is to stop and pause and dig when you feel it welling up inside and go, okay, how much of this is the good kind and how much of this is the me kind? The what I want and I'm not getting it kind. And that, I'm telling you, it feels like work. And it is a little bit of work. It's a long conversation with God you're about to have. I'm telling you, you're about to have one. You ask God a question, then there's this time where you have to meditate a little bit and pause and actually give him some space to show you something, either through the Spirit in your own consciousness or through the words of a friend or someone you talk to. And there may be a slightly uncomfortable moment afterward where you go, you know what, I didn't do very well just then. But it's worth digging. It's worth digging because here's the thing. The purpose, get this, has a purpose. Anger has a purpose. And the purpose, like we said, is to not allow ourselves to just tolerate things being the way that they are, and actually step up and speak out, set a boundary, do a different thing, change in ourselves, whatever it takes to protect a relationship. And many times there are relationships in our lives that we don't even realize they're not coming up to what they could come up to, because we just have this problem dealing with anger. Either we're not willing to say something that should be said, or we pretend, along those lines, we just pretend that it doesn't exist. Or every time somebody has an issue with us, or we have an issue with them, we just, go atomic. Or here's a good one: we wait and suppress it, and then we go atomic. Or we suppress it, and we never go atomic, but all of that unexpressed conflict and concern actually rears its ugly head in all these other kind of behavioral things that we wouldn't realize are even connected to the anger, connected to the tension in those relationships. Some of the choices we make, the passive-aggressive things that come out of people sometimes. Well, they never argue with me, but sometimes they just, walk off and never talk to me. Look, wait, what? Wait a minute. That's not so sure that's an anger thing. But it's meant for a purpose. And if we skip digging, not only do we just ignore what's going on in the heart, we're actually sacrificing the opportunity for a relationship to get better than it is. Better than it's ever been. And some of the most powerful moments that you will have, I'll tell you ahead of time, you already know this, are probably some of the most uncomfortable when you think about having them. One of the hardest moments for me, when we were doing fostering as a family, and I had a adolescent, well, not even that much yet, a little bit younger. We've been, working together a long time, and they had learned what my buttons were, and they pushed them, and they pushed them, and they pushed them, and they pushed them, and they pushed them. Sometimes they push them all at once, just to see, can we get the Kraken? I want the Kraken. And so one day, he got me going. And I was working outside, and we're trying to do a thing together, and he was, just, I don't want to do that, I don't want to do that. It was a bad attitude. It was slightly insulting about it. And I just remember going, I am not James Smith anymore. You want the Kraken, you get the Kraken. Here comes the Kraken, and I just went off. And I'm ashamed and embarrassed I was mean. I wasn't just corrective in nature, right? I was mean. Why did I have to get mean? He didn't need me to be mean. I got mean and nasty and made fun of them, and what came out of you, sir, just now? Where's that? The hardest thing, the most embarrassing but good thing that happened to me out of that, I was forced to look at myself and go, what is going on in me right now? And I had to back up. And when I picked it apart, the truth was, there was disrespect in there. And in me, I know, in my spirit, disrespect of adults is going to be bad for you. If you carry that further into life, you're going to have real problems with people. Part of me as a man and as a parent knows that. But then there's this other part of me that says, you disrespected me. How dare you disrespect me? I'm going to teach you never to disrespect me again, because how important am I? I'm super important, right? And so there's this mixture going on in there. One of the hardest things I ever had to do is just look inside and back up and go, okay. There's a little bit of something in there that's actually good. There's a whole bunch of something in there that wasn't good. Now I've got to separate them out. And the only way I can do that is to go back and have a conversation and apologize for the piece that really was rotten. And own it. And then, make small, but still make something of the piece and try and explain what was going on in me and why that matters to me and why you matter to me and why I'm concerned. Oh, I'm tired thinking about it. I'm exhausted thinking about it. But we had to do it. We had to do it. And you know, the result of that conversation surprised me. Surprised me. Because you know what they said? They said, well, you know, yeah, that was extra. They didn't miss word. Yeah, that was a lot, man. But I think I see what you're saying. I think I see what you're saying. I think I get it. I was blown away. I was blown away. I'm not saying, you know, that made everything unicorns and cupcakes from ever after. It didn't. But there was a moment there, and I realized, you know, that's an important skill. That's an important thing we have to do as Christians, is own the part that wasn't any good, separate out the part that actually did mean something, and have a conversation about it. One of the most important things that you might be facing this week or next week is this moment where you kind of get ahead of yourself and say some things you didn't mean to say, let out some frustration that wasn't so good, and you have to backtrack. And it begins with having a conversation with God and asking the question, how much of this was the good kind and how much of this was just me? But don't forget part 2. Don't forget part 2. Circling back around. And as much as they'll let you try and work some things out, try and explain, try to apologize as best you possibly can, try and make it clear, do your best. You can't make it all good and go away, but you can try. And what if it's just the thing that relationship needs to get a little better and go further and farther than it's been? What if that's the thing that's been holding you back? What if that's the thing that's been holding you back with your kids? What if that's a thing that's been holding you back at work? What if that's a thing that's been holding you back in your marriage? What if that's a thing that's been holding you back with your parents or friends that used to be friends, now they're not friends anymore? It would be worth it. And if nothing else, it would be worth it to gain peace in an area that's been causing you tension quietly and not being dealt with for a long time. Knowing that, yeah, you know what? I had a problem, I did a dumb thing, but I did everything in my power to do right by my Heavenly Father when it came time, when I realized it. Now, there's a lot more to anger than just what I said, but I think that's enough for today. Got a couple of tips and tricks we'll share next week, and we're going to get into some other wonderful emotions. Remember, they're not good, they're not bad, they're just reflective of what's going on in here. So it's time to deal with them. All right, I'm going to pray, but listen, we have communion today. And so I'm going to invite our band to come back up today. Come on up, guys. This is your call. Come on up, band. We're going to have communion. They're going to share a song afterwards. But it's time to pull out those little cups. Beautiful little plastic cups with a built-in wafer in the top. If you're not familiar with communion or you're not super comfortable with what it means, like I'm totally fine. Actually, I encourage you to not go with the flow and just do what everybody else is doing today. It's not that kind of a thing. It's meant to be more meaningful than that. So if you're concerned that maybe you don't understand what you're doing, I'd really ask you just sit back and just watch and take it in. Communion is meant to be a remembering thing. We're meant to remember not just what Jesus has done. That's a huge part of it. But also to remember that the promise stands. The promise that if we put our faith in Him and repent of our sin and commit to His way and trust Him for the things that we need, there's forgiveness for our transgressions, for our sins. And that's what we do this morning when we take this cup. I'm going to speak these words, which you may have heard before. The Lord Jesus, on the night of His arrest, took bread, which is this little wafer in here. Go ahead and get that thing out. He took bread, and after giving thanks to God, He broke it and said, "This is my body, which is for you. Do this in remembrance of me." In the same way, after supper, He took the cup, saying, "This cup is the new covenant in my blood. Do this whenever you drink it in remembrance of me. remembrance of me. He says, for whenever you eat this bread and drink this cup, you proclaim the death of the Lord until he comes. You're reminding yourself and you're reminding others that there's a promise coming. That Jesus didn't just die and say nice things and go and then we're done. But he actually went with the promise that he's coming back. And there's a future for you beyond the end of this life. There's more life. Hang on to that. Hang on with me, even though it won't make sense some of these times. It'll get dark. It'll get discouraging. Hang on, because there's something more coming, and it's better than everything you've experienced so far. Remember, he says. Do this as often as you eat. Remember. So as you break this bread, you can symbolically do that if you want to, but as you eat this bread, you drink from this little cup, we're asking Jesus together to help us to remember the promise, help us to remember the help us to remember the commitment he's made to you and me. In Jesus' name, amen.